Good evening, everyone. I'm going to start with a new topic, the rise of the West, and how both colonialism and capitalism helped in its rise. And before proceeding on to this chapter, let's take a background look at what we have learned so far. And in the previous video, we talked about the age of sail and the beginning of colonialism. And beginning of colonialism. और एक बार फिर से let's look at the situation, let's look at the global politics from the eyes of the Ice Age. So, Ice Age, which started around 2.6 million years ago, and this Ice Age, it coincided with the appearance of Homo habilis and the initiation of or the beginning of Paleolithic Age. Then आगे चलते हैं around 300,000 Homo sapiens appeared on the canvas of life. Then, around 12,000 years ago, precisely 11,000 years ago, Ice Age came to an end, and it gradually led way to the interglacial period. Interglacial or warm period, और जैसे ही बर्फ पिघली, then it gave way to large swaths of pastures and vegetation, और उनके साथ ही came the multiplication of animals, especially cattle and ungulates that depended on vegetation, commonly known as herbivores. So all those animals who eat vegetation, who eat plant, are known as herbivores. And फिर कुछ हजारों साल बाद, around 6,000 years ago, started the Neolithic age, or the first revolution of mankind. And this was known as such because of emergence of agriculture, domestication of animals and plants, then sedentary lifestyle, permanent settlement, newer pottery cultures. So इन सब attributes, इन सब characteristics की वजह से Neolithic is called the first revolution of mankind, and you can compare this time with the earlier one. You can compare Neolithic with the Mesolithic and the Paleolithic and the time before that. So इस वक्त में 6000 साल पहले around the area of Fertile Crescent, the area that was the area that included modern Middle East, और आप ये सब नाम such as the Golan Heights, Jericho, some places of Turkey such as Chattel, Huyuk, बहुत सारे नाम हैं, and even the date maybe I keep referring to 6000 BCE, but this date uh, may vary from 6000 years to 9000 years. All in all, the average around is 7000 BCE for Neolithic revolution, Neolithic age. So In some places where in our Middle East or the Fertile Crescent, first settlements appeared on the ground, and out of those settlements, one such settlement in Mesopotamia became the cradle of civilization later on. And this place is referred as such because of emergence of or birth of three such civilizations. The first one is Mesopotamian civilization itself, then the Assyrian civilization, and the Sumerian one. Then around 3000 BCE, writing emerged, and जो पहले के जो advancement है, writing added another flavor to it, and this the whole canvas it got bigger. As this bigger canvas became a fertile, became the bigger canvas became a fertile ground for emergence of future civilizations. क्योंकि you can see the linearity of history here, that from wilderness we we traversed the ice ages, we migrated, we dispersed. From handyman we started employing the tools. Tools help us survival, and this survival led the gradual separation of our own subspecies by name of Homo sapiens. Then the ice age came to an end, and with it ended the ordeal that we were going through. Then with the end of the ice age, interglacial period started, which led to warm condition, warm atmosphere, warm climatic features. Then we had seen pastures, vegetation, proliferation of cattle, herbivores, ungulates, and around 6000 to 9000 BCE, we we had seen the first Neolithic revolution with some advanced feature to the as compared to the other periods. Then the area of Fertile Crescent it came into prominence because of the rise of Neolithic revolution. The first settlement, the evidences of first settlement are still be seen there, and with all such features that generally added color to otherwise blank canvas of ours, blank canvas of our own species, came the arrival of newer civilizations, and with it rose a period of writing, and there was no looking back. And when I say there was no looking back from here, I am teaching in 2025 is testimony to that statement. Uske baad we had never looked back, and we had never another all such basic survival uh, or anything related to basic survival that made us worried. And I say it because अगर आप सिर्फ होमो सेपियंस का इतिहास देखेंगे फ्रॉम 300,000 टू 2025, इस पूरे टाइम में there was something of a miracle, because again I'm talking about ice age. So from 2.6 million years to our arrival. So our arrival and the progression of ice age coincided, and we tolerated the ice age. We survived the ice ages for 270,000 years, 78,000 years, and this is a great feat. And this speaks about our resilience, our ingenuity, our collective efforts, our unity, and यही सब तो attributes हैं which we are going to talk about in इंटरनेशनल रिलेशन, इन ग्लोबल पॉलिटिक्स, इन पोलिटिकल साइंस, यही सब वो सारे सोशल एंड पॉलिटिकल पैरामीटर्स हैं. बस the degree will be changed. Earlier, I will be talking about resilience of human as a species during the ice ages, but later on we may be talking about the resilience of people during the World War, or maybe after the World War, maybe during the time of COVID-19 pandemic. So times will change, the situations will change, the threats and conditions will change, but the basic qualities they will remain the same. Then, from cradle of civilization, from Mesopotamia, we started dispersing into nearby area because जब survival possible हो गया, basic needs are being met, then it was obvious that we will multiply. And this multiplication itself means many mouths to feed, many mouths to feed, and on the philosophical level, it may mean many souls to quench. क्योंकि अगर आपकी बेसिक नीड्स कंप्लीट हो जाती है, when your stomach is full, then your mind keep thinking about the other prospects, the other area where you can exploit, other area where you can dive into. And with that, this cradle, it gave way to civilization in Greece, in Roman, in Europe, in Africa, in Asia. And so much so that gradually we antiquity, or in other words, the cradle of civilization, it gave birth to many new infants, which later on spread their wings, spread their arms and limbs, and gave way to Greco-Roman empires of classical antiquity, which is situated around 1000 BC. And this Greco-Roman empire, it was centered around the Mediterranean basin, and its influence also extended to Africa, Europe, West Asia, and even northern part of India as well. अगर आपको याद हो, the coming of Alexander, the battle with Porus, Alexander the Great, the battle with Porus, the arrival of Roman forces near Indus. So from Neolithic to cradle of civilization to the period of classical antiquity, the civilization phase, it gradually extended and flourished in a part which is known as a region of Afro-Eurasia. Because you can see even in the period of classical antiquity, the influence of Greco-Roman Empire, it spread to all these areas, to the northern parts of Africa, to much of Europe, to West Asia as well, and even to the northern part of India as well. So this period of Afro-Eurasia, it saw extensive cultural and trade contacts. And यही period of classical antiquity, it kept on going till 14th century, when the death blow to this trade and cultural interaction, it was mated by the arrival of Black Death or plague pandemic, Black Death or plague. And this plague, it killed around 100 million people of that time, 100 million people of 14th century. And with this loss, the region of Afro-Eurasia also lost the cultural and trade contexts that have been happening for thousands of years. Then in 15th and 16th century, यूरोप के अंदर इंडस्ट्रियल रिवोल्यूशन स्टार्ट हुई, एंड इसी इंडस्ट्रियल रेवोल्यूशन के साथ arrived seaworthy vessels or the age of maritime sail. And उसके बाद this age of maritime sail, it gave way to colonialism. So this is a brief history of from the time from ice age to the um, 19th century, to the age of colonialism. अब हम आगे देखते हैं how from 16th century onwards the planet Earth, the globe, it saw the rise of the West. So West here it means the USA and Europe. So फिर conditions की बात करते हैं. Which conditions or what favorable condition gave rise to the Western powers? First one is जो हमने पिछले वीडियो में या अभी ब्रीफ बैकग्राउंड में भी देखा that it was the age of discovery or the age of maritime trade that gradually cleared the way for colonialism. So let's ask some brief questions. First one is, what were the conditions that led to the advancement of maritime age? Then second question, how did the West came to have the modern or the advanced technologies of that time? And to answer both these questions, let's look at the situation of 16th century. So 16th century was the age of both Renaissance and Enlightenment. And politically, it was also the time of uh, Peace of Westphalia, which came up with a truce in the name of sovereignty of individual nation and the recognition of it, which means उस वक्त जो फ्रेगमेंटेड पॉलिटी थी, जो यूरोप जो इधर उधर बिखरा हुआ था, all of them recognize that each nation or each such political unit, it is sovereign in itself, and other powers, whoever consider themselves as sovereign, they need to recognize the sovereignty of others. So political order भी establish हो गया, a peaceful order. Then जो 16th century से पहले का जो डार्क एज था, डार्क एज ऑफ the rule of church, the age of superstition, वो सब they were replaced by the period of Renaissance and Enlightenment. And in such situation, when you look all such situation together, it appears that all these factors, they provided stable order to the West, to Europe and to the Western countries. And इस stable order की वजह से वहाँ पे innovation शुरू हुए, technological innovation. And if you are able to recall Thomas Edison, and that person, he has 1000 patents on his name. And उसके बाद आप चाहे, you may keep recalling the various advancement of 16th and 17th centuries of the Western countries. So all such technological advancement, whether it is diesel engine, whether it is engine then diesel engine, uh, whether it is railway, you may take example of small bulb to large vessels. all such advancement that occurred in the West during that time. Now, let's come back to the chapter. So, this era of European colonialism, it was central to the making of the West as a relatively coherent global entity or actor. So, alongside and connected to colonialism and empire building, it enabled several other developments were critical to the rise of the West in the world order. Let's first talk about the political atmosphere. So, in the 16th and 17th century, it saw the establishment of sovereign states with a strong central government, and this is attributed to the Peace of Westphalia. आप लोग बहुत बार इंटरनेशनल रिलेशंस में बहुत बार इसके बारे में पढ़ेंगे. The Peace of Westphalia, which brought an end to the 30 years war between Catholic and Protestant nations. And इस ट्रूस के साथ ही इस ट्रूस सीज फायर के साथ ही gradually establish a strong political order that rested on the principle of sovereignty and central governments. And then this sovereign statehood, it fostered a level of social and political stability that favored technological innovation and economic developments. So as I told you, कि उस वक्त जितने भी पेटेंट्स हैं, जितने भी टेक्नोलॉजिकल इनोवेशंस हैं, even the industrial revolution of 16th century, it is also attributed to the Western Hemisphere or the Western countries. Such as you may recall the name of the warehouse of the world, which was the United Kingdom or Britain at that time. And then in the scientific sphere, scientific and philosophical sphere, there were many changes, positive changes, which can be clubbed together in the movement of enlightenment in the 18th and 19th century. And this period of enlightenment, it was period of turning away from religious dogmatism of the dark age of church, and then from the monarchical rule under which many such nationality or many principalities of Europe at that time and before that time were ruled under this doctrine, which is called the divine right of the kings. So इस doctrine के अंदर पहले के उस enlightenment के पहले के जो यूरोपियन monarchs हैं, they used to cite misuse or in the other terms misuse this particular doctrine, which says kings have a right to rule because this right it has been given by the Lord himself. So it will not be difficult to understand that ये this particular doctrine, it can be traced to the dark age of church. And इस डॉक्ट्रिन के एस्टैब्लिशमेंट में चर्च का भी रोल था. जस्ट लाइक कह सकते हैं मॉडर्न टाइम के पहले मिडिवल टाइम में किसी भी कंट्री में the same principle, the same accomplice, or in other words, a nexus could be seen between the ruling authority and the priestly classes, between rulers and priests. It was not just typical to the dark ages of church. Such instances of nexus between rulers and priests, they were seen from all societies, whether it were the Western or the Eastern society. Even in India, during the medieval time, जितने भी rulers हैं, they used to take the obeisance of the priestly class, so that in return for some monetary gifts or land grants, priestly classes, they used to confirm the right of the rule of the rulers. And this period of enlightenment, it was tightly connected to the political establishment within Europe and to an emerging Western identity of that time. All in all, let's take a coherent view of the rise of the West. So first, political order, it got stabilized because of the Peace of Westphalia, and then in the social and the scientific aspect, the period of enlightenment, it favored टेक्नोलॉजिकल इनोवेशंस जो पहली इंडस्ट्रियल रेवोल्यूशन है वो यूरोप में ही हुई थी विच led to establishment of factories in the western hemisphere or western countries at that time and then अगर साइंटिफिक एंड फिलोसॉफिकल एंगल की बात करें तो एनलाइटनमेंट के कारण people they gradually turned away from religious dogmatism and shifted away to emergence of a western identity that rested on liberal principle and rational principle. So you can see here the political and moral philosopher and the early international relation theorist Immanuel Kant. He was one of the intellectual who was associated with enlightenment tradition. So this new European or Western identity, it was characterized by rationalism and a strong sense of cultural superiority. Let's look at the definition of the West. So West has two overlapping meanings. In general sense, it refers to the cultural and philosophical inheritance of Europe, which has been exported through colonialism to other countries. And the root of this inheritance lies in the classical Greece and the Greco-Roman Empire or the period of classical antiquity. And in narrower sense, the West refers to the US-led capitalist bloc, which is opposed to USSR dominated Eastern or socialist bloc. Now, let's look at the rise of the West. The most significant transition of Europe during the 16th and 17th century from medieval and feudal modes of production was towards a capitalist economic model. So इसी लाइंस के साथ ही दो चीजें क्लियर होती है. First, the prevalent mode of production before the rise of the West. So the medieval or the feudal mode of production was based on social hierarchies and rigid pattern of obligation, in which the tenant farmers and other workers they labor on the lands of aristocrats in exchange for subsistence provisions such as food and shelter for their family rather than wage. So it was a kind of system. अपने इंडिया में you can see the parallel in the form of जमींदारी system and जजमानी system. जमींदारी and जजमानी system दोनों को देखते हैं. So जमींदारी system में before the arrival of the British, what used to be the situation that suppose ये एक particular land है under control of a king A, and since king himself could not collect the revenue, so he used to distribute this land among various parcels. So let's say these many parcels are there, and each such parcel it was the responsibility of a zamindar who used to live there. So Zamindar was a kind of both a police authority and a revenue collector that worked independently but along with the king. So those revenue collectors they used to collect revenue from this land. They would keep something for themselves and send the rest to the hierarchy, which ultimately ended in the coffers or in the chests of the royal treasury. So the zamindari system, it used to work in this way, and this system was also employed by sultans of Delhi Sultanate and the emperors of Mughal Empire. And Even the British, they also employed this system for some time, especially during the time of permanent settlement. So all in all, zamindars, they acted as revenue collectors. And then let's talk about the Jajmani system. So one difference exists between these two systems. Zamindari system was more akin to a revenue collection system, whereas Jajmani system was a social practice. So होता क्या था that in every particular village, any upper caste Brahmin or upper caste person, especially the Brahmins, they used to act as the the hub of a village. Suppose the whole society is a village, and so they acted as a hub, and on various folks were different castes. And अगर आप याद कर सकते हैं, during the ancient medieval time, the caste system in India, it was characterized by occupational structure, which means कि हर caste का अपना एक occupation था. For example, cobbler was a caste in which they only kept themselves limited to the cobbling work, about leather and tanning. And if we talk about weaving, they kept themselves limited to the weaving job of weaving clothes. The same way, if there is a goldsmith or blacksmith, everyone kept themselves busy with their own caste-based occupation. So in this hub and spoke model, the Brahmin acting as a hub. So in this system, in Jajmani system, ये सब जितने भी कास्ट हैं, दे वर्क फॉर स्पेशली टेनेंट फार्मर्स, दे वर्क फॉर ब्राह्मण, दे वर्क ऑन हिज लैंड, ऑन हिज फील्ड्स. और उसके बदले में ब्राह्मण ही यूज्ड टू प्रोवाइड देम विद शेयर ऑफ प्रोड्यूस. जो भी पैदा, जो भी जितना भी माल फील्ड में होता था, जितना भी अनाज फील्ड में हुआ, so ultimately it ended in the houses of Brahmins, और फिर उसके बाद they distributed the same according to the caste norms of Jajmani system at that time. So feudalism भी यूरोप का जो feudalism है, it was a mix of both zamindari and Jajmani system. But with the rise of the West, this feudal mode of production, it shifted toward capitalist economic model. And this shift, this transition, it stimulated the growth of industrialization, which started in mid 18th century in Britain, which is also called the workshop of the world at the time, and it gradually spread during the 19th century to North America and throughout Western and Central Europe. So those industrialized states, they acquired massively enlarged productive capacity. जो मैंने अभी कहा था कि the difference lies in the factory scales, because the Western countries of that time, they were producing mm, goods in large number in factories. So this enlarged productive capacity, it contributed to their military strength, by which I meant the material superiority or the material strength. कि जब टेक्नोलॉजिकल इनोवेशंस हुए, उनके पास फैक्ट्री स्केल प्रोडक्शन कैपेसिटीज हैं, धीरे धीरे यही इनोवेशन दैट ग्रेजुअली गिव वे टू और ग्रेजुअली shifted towards production of ammunitions such as ammunitions, gunpowder. आपको you might remember the instance of the first uses of gunpowder by Babur, the founder of Mughal Empire in India. Then gunpowder, it led to the production of rifles, the crude form of rifles known as muskets, and then rest is the history. उसके बाद तो प्रोडक्शन जो एमिनेशंस हैं या जो मिलिट्री स्ट्रेंथ है इट केप्ट इंक्रीजिंग. फिर उसके बाद the advance of agricultural and industrial technology also contributed to improving diets and rising living standards, which over time had a massive impact on the size of world's population. वो you can see in the chart here growth of the world population since 1700. So 1700 में world population was 610 million, which increased to 1 billion in 1804. So in the increase of 400 million in 100 years. Then from 1 billion to 1.6 billion, which is increase of 600 million in another 100 years. Then from 1.6 billion to 3 billion. So that is an increase of 1.4 billion in just 60 years. So from 3 billion to 4.5 billion, that is an increase of 1.5 billion, and it happened in just 20 years. Then again from 4.5 billion to 6.1 billion, that is an increase of 1.6 billion in again 20 years. Then finally from 6.1 to 7.8 billion, that is an increase of 1.7 billion in 20 years. So you can see the progressive chart here, and this increasing population is also one factor that led the people into the conflict for resources. Then colonialism was central to the development of capitalism, as was slavery. So both slavery and colonialism, they were a product of and related to capitalism. Slavery, which persisted as a part of capitalist world economy for more than 300 years. Then the trade in forced human labor from Africa and New World complemented the emergence of wage labor economy and industrial working class within Europe. So as I have said, Europe, the factory of the world, it needed both manpower and raw material. So raw material के लिए you can see the big culprit here, colonialism. But manpower, ultimately, capitalism itself is founded on the motive of profit. So profit जनरेट करने के लिए कोई भी आपका एंटरप्राइज है, if you are running a factory, so the first and basic timeless method of increasing profit is to cut the cost. So cost cutting method, इसमें क्या होता है, जो भी आपका कॉस्ट लग रहा है, the input cost, if you can decrease it, if you can reduce it, आपका profit ultimately it will increase. And cost cutting के लिए जो दो चीज़ें ज़रूरी है, मैन पावर एंड रॉ मटेरियल. फर्स्ट कॉलोनियलिज्म से आप जो भी आपकी कॉलोनी है वहाँ से आप बहुत ही कम प्राइसेस में रॉ मटेरियल लेके आ रहे हैं. सो फर्स्ट इंस्टेंस ऑफ कॉस्ट कटिंग. देन मैन पावर के लिए, इफ यू आर engaging people on salary, they are going to cost something. But if you are enslaving people and fitting them in onto large vessels, fitting them onto ships, so that they could be forcibly transported to work in your factory for free. So here again, another instance of cost cutting can be seen. So both these methods, they relied on one of the one of the aspect of capitalism was it was to seek the profit. It was to increase the profit. And profit कैसे increase करना? By cutting cost. And how to cut cost? Buy the raw material at the cheapest price, by enslaving people, and then when you enslave people, transport the same people to your factory. They will work for free. And why would they work free? Because you are culturally superior. Because you are a white person, you have a burden that has been given by God to civilize the rest of the world, especially the people of the new world. So all in all, this trade in forced labor from Africa and the New World, it also led to emergence of a wage labor economy, which means that slaves भी free में काम नहीं करेंगे. You need to give them something. So yes, if your God is a capitalist one and you need profit at all instance, then you can make him work for less wage. But कुछ ना कुछ तो देना पड़ेगा. And with it came the economy of wage labor, and gradually industrial working class also emerged within Europe. So all in all, some 8 to 10.5 million Africans, they were forcibly transported to the Americas in a regime of systematic enslavement. It was led by the then European colonial powers such as the British, Spanish, Portuguese, and other major colonial powers of Europe. Then another question comes कि जो Western people हैं, when finally the West emerge on the canvas with a big stature, तो उन्होंने अब लोगों को क्या कहा होगा कि what factors led to the rise of itself, what were the principles, what were the tools and techniques that help in its rise. So उनका narrative जो था, it was biased, it was subjective towards an internalist story, which means they believed that the rise of the West, it was spontaneous and endogenous, which means they had the capabilities. Those capabilities, those characteristics were inherent in them. So Western historians of the time, they put forward this narrative about internalist story. So in other words, these accounts, they depicted the political and economic rise of the West as as though they were the product of some intrinsic European or Western ingenuity. इसका मतलब है कि the Western historian, they depicted themselves as God-given or some gifted people, and they believed that the rise was spontaneous, and it was because of their own ingenuity, their own internal characteristic. But many uh, many other historians from other culture, they refuted this story as a founding myth of Eurocentrism, which means it was a myth which was seen by the European eyes, and हमने देख लिया है कि all this, the story of rise, it was a story of slavery, it was story of colonialism, of capitalism, of domination, of forcible transportation, of human enslavement. Then uh, the reality of the rise of the West was that the social realities and transformation that were external and exogenous to Europe, from colonial encounters to international trade to the influence of non-Western philosophers and theologians on Western political thought, they also played a central role in this remaking of the world. And इस पैराग्राफ का मतलब है कि the story, the founding myth, it can be refuted. The attributes of the rise, कुछ तो ये सब हैं. Then these Western civilization, they also borrowed many traditions, many principles from other cultures, other non-Western philosophers, and all of them they played a coherent and combined role in the remaking of the rise of the West. Then, contrary to the internal story of Western-led world development, great centers and other centers of power also develop outside of Europe. So ये एक another objection है कि अगर the rise of civilization or the cultural superiority of West, it is their inherent right or it is their inherent characteristic, then other centers of civilization should not have been emerged. But in reality, other centers दूसरी जगह पे भी civilization emerged that were independent of the Western civilizations. So one such is until the 19th century Opium Wars, China's Qing dynasty it was a thriving cultural and political power which by 18th century controlled vast swaths of inner Asia and a booming trade in commodities including tea, silk and silver. So इस पैराग्राफ का मतलब यह है कि first this paragraph is refuting this founding myth or providing the supportive evidence that uh, the Eurocentrism or the internal story it was just a myth, and the real reason is that the reason for providing this evidence is अगर जो सिविलाइजेशनल पिनेकल है जो उन्होंने which according to Western historian was inherent in the Western civilization, then other centers, other great civilization outside the Europe could not have emerged. But यहाँ पे China's Qing dynasty and even India's Mughal, they were the example that other centers of power also existed that were independent of the European control. Then finally, let's look at the teachings of Confucius. So Confucius has strongly shaped political and cultural value in China, East Asia, and many communities in the West. So, contrary to his contemporary in ancient Greece, so whose philosopher would underlie the power of the rights of and the needs of individual in relation to their fellow citizens, Confucius he emphasized social duties and paternal obligations, also known as filial piety, which means the obligation to honor one's parents and ancestors through good conduct. So, the meaning of the simple version of this paragraph is that the contemporary um, Greek philosophers of that time they emphasize the role of individual, the needs and powers and the rights of individual. Whereas Confucius he talked about one's social obligations, one's duty towards one's parents and ancestors, and he also talked about good conduct. Those Confucian values they are about acting correctly and with integrity in all of one's dealings. And most famous of his work is it is the Analects, which was collected and published posthumously during the Han Dynasty. So this is the end of this chapter, and we will study about industrialization and imperialism in the next video. Thank you very much. Kindly excuse for all the skirmishes, for all the ups and downs, all the hiccups that come in um, my presentation. Kindly bear with me. I'll try. I'm trying to improve, and I know I'll definitely improve. Thank you very much. Kindly subscribe the channel.